Hi, I'm Paul Figueroa of Peace Enforcement LLC. Thanks for stopping by. Today we're going to talk a little bit about a concept I share in some of my trainings, especially a training I do called Helping Difficult Customers. This one talks about how things happen, how we react so quickly and why to certain stimulus. And we're going to look a little bit about how perceptions happen and how thoughts create feelings. The reason we're going to look at it is because once we understand what's happening, and if you look at it closely enough, you realize that when you have an intense feeling or a feeling happens, there's usually a thought, and it can be really brief, that happens before that. And if you break it down, you can actually become more of a master of feelings and have more control, if you will, over them, or they don't run you as much. Okay? It's not saying the feelings are bad or awful. It's more about, oh, this is happening, like a dashboard in your car. I'm starting to overheat. What do I need to do? So there's not any panic in it. It's more about information. So let's take a look at this for a second. What happens is something happens outside of it. It's this thing, it's stimulus. It could be somebody starts raising their voice, or somebody says a certain word or phrase. We all have them. And then what happens is it goes through our filter. And in my context, I talk about filters being like a tea bag. It's like the tea is past experiences that taint things that come in, and the little tea leaves get stuck on the event and change what is really happening. It changes our perception. For example, I used to, with my mom, whenever I think of peanut butter cookies, and some of these filters are positive. I think of peanut butter cookies, I can literally see them and I smell them. I get a warm, happy feeling. There are other things that aren't so hot. For example, loud noises. For some people, the filter hooks in with past events. So the filter is made up usually of past experiences, you see? So here's the stimulus. It goes through a filter that's made up of past experiences, and oftentimes triggers panic or fear, because your brain's all of a sudden active, because it's like, I don't want to go through this again, so I'm going to create a situation where I'm on high alert now because of the stimulus. And oftentimes what happens too is your brain future trips, and this happens in a millisecond. You'll be like, oh, this happened before, I don't want to have this happen again. Panic sets in, and then intense feelings start to flow. Okay? So that's how quickly it happens. Now what I want to show you next is the brain. This is a slow down or more of an example we're talking about. The brain takes the stimulus and the feeling and intermixes it with past and future, and you get a response like, what the heck is happening? I can't believe it. So it all happens in a millisecond. The filter's there, the brain has a reaction, and it actually thinks it's trying to protect you. That's a really interesting thing. And if we leave it unattended, we get overly defensive when we don't need to. We have overreactions because our brain's like, this has happened before. I don't want it to happen again. So if we're not careful, and if we leave it unattended, we have this event that happens over here, the stimulus. It goes through our perception filter. It generates a feeling that's linked in with the brain in the past and the future, and it starts creating feelings and emotions, totally left unchecked. Right? And sometimes they're positive feelings too. They're not always negative. So let's leave this one alone for right now, but let's say this is the one that we're having a hard time with, because we're realizing what happens is we get the stimulus and it feels in a millisecond, we're instantly angry. So break it down and see what your brain is doing. What's happening? What from the past is impacting what's happening now? What's the fear? What's the panic? Confront that. What's the truth in the situation? Slow things down a little bit. Okay, it's like I said earlier in my managing job stress video, it's about interrupting this process, because your brain, it's like a little puppy. It's sweet, and it doesn't know sometimes it's actually doing something that doesn't work. So somebody comes to the door and it starts barking, and it'll actually attack somebody at the door because it thinks that they're intruding when actually it's a friend. So it's really about retraining your brain, or retraining your puppy, if you will. I like puppies, black labs, to interrupt it so that process doesn't continue. Okay? Now I'm not saying don't be angry. I'm saying it's more like interrupt the process so you can make a more conscious choice of what emotion is appropriate for that environment. So you interrupt the dog barking all of a sudden. You interrupt the defense. You interrupt the worry, so you can have more mastery over what kind of response you'd like in the situation. think that's enough for this one for today. Wanted to give you a snippet and an overview of how thoughts create things. Thoughts in a millisecond create a feeling. And if you back it up, if you're having a strong feeling, usually there's a thought there. The idea is to challenge the thought, to see if it's valid, and interrupt that process that's automatic. And I'll tell you something else before we wrap this up for today. This takes patience and practice. Okay? It takes patience and practice to interrupt this so it becomes easier, because you're trying to break an old habit or an old pattern. All right. So that's all for this time. Thank you for stopping by. Feel free to check out my website if you like it, peaceenforcement.com, or feel free to give me a call.